Sir, this restaurant has a strict dress code, and we don't just seat walk-ins like you. That was the first thing Marcus heard before he even said a word. It wasn't the greeting he expected when he walked into La Rive, one of the most exclusive five-star restaurants in the city. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo or luxury watch. No designer shoes, just a crisp button-down shirt, tan slacks, and well-worn leather loafers, simple, neat, respectable. But for the hostess standing at the front podium, it was as if he had just walked in off the street with a cardboard sign and a backpack. Her lips curled slightly in a practiced professional smile, but her tone was unmistakably cold. "We're fully booked for tonight. You'll have to try somewhere else." Marcus tilted his head. "Actually, I made a reservation under Marcus Rowe. It should be in the system." She didn't look, didn't touch the tablet in front of her, just folded her arms and said, "We require jackets and formal attire, and we don't seat guests who aren't properly prepared. I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to leave." Behind her, a man in a designer suit, white mid-40s, laughed softly while sipping champagne in the bar lounge. "Trying to crash the party, huh?" he muttered under his breath, not realizing his voice carried. His date giggled. Marcus kept his posture calm, his voice low. "Ma'am, I flew in from Chicago this morning. I'm in town for one night. This dinner is important. I made a reservation a week ago. Please check." The manager appeared, then alerted by the tension in the hostess's body language. A sharply dressed woman named Chloe with slick red lipstick and an icy air of superiority. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, eyes not on the hostess, but directly on Marcus. "No problem," he said evenly. "Just trying to be seated." Chloe gave him a once-over, slow dismissive. "Unfortunately, sir, we can't accommodate guests who do not meet our dress standards. This is an upscale establishment. Perhaps a different venue would be more appropriate for you." There was no mistaking it. Now, she wasn't even pretending. She wasn't looking at his clothes. She was looking at his skin, his hair, his quiet confidence that didn't come wrapped in a Rolex. Marcus clenched his jaw slightly. "So let me get this straight. You're refusing service to someone who has a confirmed reservation because I don't look like your usual customer." Chloe's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "We reserve the right to refuse service when standards aren't met. That's our policy." The conversation had drawn attention. Now a few tables had gone quiet. A middle-aged couple in the corner whispered to each other. A young server shifted uncomfortably, watching the exchange from behind the wine station. "I understand," Marcus said softly. He reached into his wallet, pulled out his ID, and calmly placed it on the podium. Chloe glanced at it, and her eyes narrowed. "Mr. Rowe. Marcus Rowe," she read aloud. The name rang a faint bell, but not enough to override her instinct to assert dominance. "I'd still advise you to dine elsewhere," she said, voice colder now. "You won't be comfortable here." Marcus picked up his ID without another word. For a long moment he looked at her, at the hostess, at the others, watching. Then he turned and walked out. The door closed behind him with a soft hiss. The moment seemed to pass like an unpleasant gust of wind. But for the staff of La Rive, that gust was only the beginning of a storm. 27 years earlier, Marcus Rowe was working the Saturday breakfast shift at his mother's diner just outside of Detroit. The place was small, the booths were cracked, and the coffee machine hissed like a leaky pipe. But the regulars came back every weekend, mostly for Ms. Rowe's biscuits and Marcus's smile. He was only 13, but already he knew how to pour coffee, take orders, and keep calm when rude customers made offhand remarks about manners or upbringing. His mother had taught him two things: how to treat every person with dignity and how to own his own space, even when others tried to shrink it. "Don't ever let anyone make you feel like you don't belong," she'd whisper in his ear after a tough table. "Your presence is not a mistake." He believed her, and that belief, stitched into every decision he made from that point forward, would shape the rest of his life. Marcus was a straight-A student captain of the debate team and editor of the school newspaper. He got into Howard University with a partial scholarship and picked up 3 part-time jobs to cover the rest. By 22, he had a dual degree in finance and hospitality. While his peers dreamt of working for big hotel chains, Marcus had other plans. He didn't want to run someone else's restaurant. He wanted to build his own. But he knew something. Most of his classmates didn't. Money doesn't chase potential. It chases confidence, connections, and control. So Marcus hustled. He worked 12-hour shifts, managing boutique hotels during the day, and wrote business plans at night. On weekends, he attended free business workshops and investor events, not to pitch anything, just to listen. Watch, learn. At 26, he found his opportunity. A small but failing French-style bistro in Atlanta was up for sale, debt-ridden but well-located. Everyone else saw risk. Marcus saw legacy. He cashed in every favor borrowed from friends, pitched 24 angel investors, and got 23 rejections. But the 24th, an old restaurant magnate from Chicago who had once eaten at Ms. Rowe's Diner, he said yes. La Flamme opened a year later with Marcus as managing partner. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm, intentional. The wine list had purpose. The staff had heart, and the food made people cry. In under 3 years, La Flamme became a Southern culinary icon. Celebrities, politicians, even Michelin scouts walked through its arched doorway. But Marcus, he stayed grounded. Every new restaurant he opened came with the same unwritten promise: you're welcome here, whether you walk in with a Rolex or a lunchbox. By age 35, Marcus owned stakes in 7 restaurants, 3 boutique hotels, and 1 hospitality investment group called Rowe Equity Partners. Quietly, behind the scenes, he had become a silent investor in over 20 high-end venues nationwide, including a handful in New York and Los Angeles. One of them, a rising star in the West Coast dining scene, Le Rive. It was his most recent investment, a $15 million acquisition, facilitated through his firm, part of a pending partnership with an international hotel chain. The final decision was meant to be signed that same night. During a dinner hosted by Le Rive's board and head chef, Marcus had planned to walk in early anonymously to observe. He always did, because before he gave his money or his endorsement, he wanted to know how his venues treated people who weren't wearing silk ties or heels that cost more than a mortgage payment. And that's how he ended up on the sidewalk an hour earlier, humiliated in a city where he had once been honored for economic revitalization, rejected from a restaurant he partially owned by people who never even bothered to type his name into the reservation system. They didn't just fail him, they failed the standard. As he sat quietly in his rental car across the street, Marcus didn't feel rage. He felt confirmation that the culture was broken, that this wasn't an isolated mistake. It was a rot, a mindset, one that could cost not just dignity, but millions in future partnerships. He looked at his watch, 7:54 p.m. The board dinner would begin in 6 minutes. He reached for his phone, called his assistant. Pull the deal. Tonight I'll explain everything in an hour. Then he stepped out of the car, buttoned his jacket, and walked calmly back toward Le Rive. But this time, he wasn't coming as a customer. He was coming as the man who could end the biggest deal the restaurant had ever seen. 8:01 p.m. The private dining room at Le Rive sparkled with candlelight and crystal glasses. White-gloved waiters poured imported wine into long-stemmed glasses, while laughter echoed off the stone walls. Seated around the mahogany table were some of the city's most powerful hospitality executives. Across from them, the French-born head chef was nervously reviewing the tasting menu. Tonight's dinner would determine whether Le Rive would secure a multi-million-dollar partnership with Roe Equity Partners and gain access to luxury hotel chains across the country, the general manager, Chloe. The same woman who had dismissed Marcus earlier stood near the head of the table rehearsing her welcome speech under her breath. She hadn't noticed that one chair remained empty, and then the door opened. The laughter stopped. Marcus Rowe stepped inside. No fanfare, no entourage, just quiet confidence and an unshakable presence. The head chef stood up so fast, his chair nearly fell. "Mr. Rowe, welcome. We weren't expecting you until later." Chloe turned to see who had just walked in, and her face went pale. Her knees nearly buckled. The man she had looked down on, the one she had refused to serve, not even an hour ago, was now striding into the room, being greeted with reverence and handshakes from the board. Marcus shook the chef's hand, then turned to the investors. "I apologize for the delay," he said smoothly. "I had a bit of a unique experience downstairs." Chloe tried to speak, her lips moving without sound. The sommelier, who had been one of the snickering onlookers earlier, froze in place, bottle still tilted mid-air. The chairman of Le Rive's board gestured toward the empty seat at the head of the table. "Please, Marcus, we've all been eager to hear your thoughts on the final terms." Marcus didn't sit. Not yet. He turned to face the room fully. "I'll get to that," he said calmly. "But first I'd like to share what happened tonight. You could have heard a pin drop." He began to recount his arrival, how he was turned away at the door, how no one checked the reservation, how not a single staff member intervened, as he was quietly humiliated. "I didn't raise my voice. I didn't demand special treatment. I gave every opportunity for the staff to simply do their job." His gaze shifted slightly to Chloe. She was visibly trembling. "But what I got wasn't about policy," he said. "It was about perception, about who belongs and who doesn't, about what respectable looks like and what it doesn't." He paused. "I want everyone in this room to understand something very clearly. This isn't about me being offended. I've dealt with worse. I've seen worse." He let the silence hang. "This is about culture, and tonight this restaurant proved that it has one. I cannot support." The chef closed his eyes. One of the younger executives put down his fork slowly. Marcus reached into his blazer and pulled out a small leather folder. Inside was the final investment document, $87 million of growth capital and exclusive licensing rights for Le Rive to operate in 3 luxury hotels. He placed it gently on the table, then he slid it back into his inner pocket. The gesture hit harder than any insult. "I'm withdrawing the offer," Marcus said. "Effective immediately." Gasps. The chairman leaned forward, panicked. "Marcus, let's talk about this. We can resolve." No, Marcus cut in. His voice was calm but absolute. "I've built my entire portfolio on one belief that hospitality should welcome, not exclude. That it's not just about Michelin stars or sleek interiors, it's about how people are treated, especially the ones who don't look like they belong." He turned to the chef, who had now gone silent, red-faced, and speechless. "I respect your food, I really do. But I will not tie my name or my legacy to a place that treats dignity as optional." Chloe finally found her voice. "Mr. Rowe, I didn't know who you were. If I had, Marcus raised a hand. "That's the problem." He said, eyes locked on hers. "You think respect is earned by status, that it's reserved for the wealthy, the recognizable, the polished." He took a breath. "But respect, it's not about who I am, it's about who you are when no one's watching." There was nothing left to say. He turned to the staff and the room servers, interns, junior managers, all of whom had been watching this unfold with wide eyes. "Let this be a lesson, not in fear but in truth. The people you overlook, they may own the very building you stand in." Then he walked out. The door closed behind him with a soft thud, and this time everyone felt it. The moment Marcus walked out, the air in the private dining room seemed to collapse in on itself. No one reached for their wine. No one spoke. The scent of saffron and truffle oil that had once perfumed the room now felt nauseating, like luxury gone sour. The chef sat down, hands shaking. The head of marketing slowly covered her face with both palms. Even the investors from the hotel group began shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Because this wasn't just a lost deal, this was a public failure, and the ripples would spread far beyond those walls. Chloe stood frozen near the door, still processing what had just happened. Her lips were parted, but she couldn't form words. The color had drained from her face. Her voice, the one that had commanded junior servers and intimidated bar staff, was gone. The chairman of the board turned sharply toward her. "You turned him away." She nodded weakly. He didn't look like he belonged here, Silence? And you didn't think to check the reservation system? You didn't think to ask for a name I didn't?" Chloe's voice cracked. "I just assumed. That the chairman said was your mistake. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to." His tone cut sharper than any shout could. Downstairs in the main dining room, word had started to spread. Staff whispered in corners. The maitre d' leaned in close to the bar manager. "That guy? The one she kicked out earlier, what about him?" He was the investor. The investor. Marcus Rowe. There was a pause. Then, oh my God. The bartenders went silent. Two servers exchanged wide-eyed glances. One of the bussers, a young Latino man who had seen the whole thing unfold from the side, just shook his head and muttered, "Karma." Back in the private room, the atmosphere had turned clinical. "We need to fix this one." Executive said, "Apologize. Go public with a statement." Another board member shook his head. "It's already too late. Do you understand who that man is? He owns 20% of our parent group. He mentors restaurant tech startups. He has the mayor's personal number." The chef stared blankly ahead. "We've built this restaurant on exclusivity," he said. "But maybe we excluded the wrong person." Meanwhile, Marcus had returned to his car. He didn't slam the door, he didn't curse. He just sat in the driver's seat and looked out over the city skyline. Tall, sharp towers, glowing against the dusk. The phone rang. It was one of the hotel executives. He let it go to voicemail. Another call, his lawyer. Then his PR consultant. He answered that one. "I need a statement drafted," he said calmly. "I'll review it in the morning. For now, no interviews, no social media. We let the facts speak." The consultant hesitated. "Marcus, this is going to go viral. The staff saw, guests saw. Some were recording?" "I know," he said. "And that's fine. Let it." At La Rive. Chloe had locked herself in her office. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through Google Marcus Rowe article after article. The black billionaire of boutique dining. The hospitality visionary, shaping the future of fine dining, Marcus Rowe, from grease-stained aprons to private jets. Then the photos, him with mayors, with food critics, on stage accepting national awards. And one image in particular, Marcus in a navy blue suit shaking hands with the CEO of the hotel group that Larive had been courting for months. Her stomach turned. She wasn't the only one feeling it. Richard the sommelier, who had smirked as Marcus was turned away, now paced nervously behind the bar. He had joked, nodded along, reinforced Chloe's decision earlier, and now he couldn't stop sweating. "I was just following lead," he whispered to a co-worker. But it didn't matter now. Everyone remembered his laugh, his silence, his complicity. The staff had seen it, customers had seen it, and so had the cameras. Upstairs, the chairman pulled aside the chef and whispered something cold and final. "Unless you want your name dragged into the next press release, you'll handle this internally." Fast. 10 minutes later, Chloe was called back into the boardroom. The chairman didn't look angry. He looked finished. "Miss Lambert, he said you are relieved of your duties, effective immediately." She blinked. "What? What about a warning? A suspension? I've been here 8 years, which is exactly why this is so disappointing. No drama, no spectacle, just a door quietly closing on a once powerful voice. By the end of the night, 5 staff members had either resigned or were placed under review. 2 media outlets had already picked up a leaked clip of the confrontation, and Marcus Rowe's quiet refusal to play the victim had become the most talked-about story in the city's fine dining scene. But Marcus wasn't done yet. Because this wasn't about revenge. It was about setting a new standard, one that the entire industry would soon be forced to follow. 3 days later, the hospitality industry was still buzzing. Clips from the restaurant security camera had leaked. So had footage from a diner's cell phone. In both, Marcus never raised his voice. He never insulted anyone, never threatened. He just stood there composed, calm, powerful. And somehow, that made it worse for the people who had mistreated him. 'Cause it proved the humiliation wasn't provoked. It was policy. It was prejudice. It was normal. And now, it was exposed. Media headlines flooded in. Investor denied service due to race. Pulls $9 million deal. From 5-star restaurant Marcus Rowe. Sets new standard for equity in fine dining. The day hospitality's polished image cracked. The mayor released a statement, so did the National Hospitality Alliance. But the most impactful post came directly from Marcus himself. It was short. Just a single photo of his mother's old diner. The caption read, "We served everyone, no reservations required. Ms. Rowe, 1998, no hashtags, no self-praise." Within 48 hours, the post had over 42 million likes and had been shared by celebrities, CEOs, civil rights leaders, and critics from the New York Times. Inside boardrooms across the country, the fallout continued. Restaurants where Marcus had ownership shares were receiving audit requests. Publicists were drafting equity statements. Internally, staff were being retrained. Investors were panicking. But Marcus was already planning the next move. On Monday morning, he stepped into a sleek, glass-walled office in downtown Chicago. The brass plaque on the front door read, "Rowe Equity Partners." His assistant handed him a folder. Inside, a full list of every luxury hospitality venue in which his firm had any level of stake. Over 41 properties, he scanned the list silently, then flipped to the last page. Prepared statement ready for publication. His assistant said, "Whenever you're ready." He took a breath. "Send it." The statement was released across all major networks. Effective immediately, Row Equity Partners will initiate a 90-day review of all hospitality holdings. Properties will be evaluated not just on profitability, but on people. We will be implementing a new equity hospitality standard, TQM, that addresses front-of-house bias discriminatory service practices and leadership diversity. Any venue failing to meet baseline human dignity metrics will be subject to immediate divestment. Marcus Rowe, managing partner. The effect was seismic. Marcus didn't just remove money from Le Rive. He changed the conversation across an entire industry. Hotels scrambled to audit their restaurant partners. Fine dining brands rushed to hire DEI consultants. Franchise groups started holding emergency respect training town halls. Some thought it was theater, but others, especially the ones who had read Marcus's full review criteria, understood. This wasn't a PR stunt. It was a realignment of power because now money demanded equity. At the same time, Marcus began assembling a new council, a group of hospitality veterans, civil rights advisors, and working-class servers from all backgrounds. The mission was simple. If you can afford foie gras and caviar, you can afford to treat every human being with respect. Among the first members of the council, a 23-year-old former line cook from Atlanta who'd once been passed over for promotion because he didn't fit the upscale brand, and a Filipino-American maitre d' who left a job at a Michelin-starred venue after being told to seat white couples first during high-traffic nights. They weren't just advisory members, they were now decision-makers on where capital would go next. Back at Le Rive, the fallout continued. The board had issued a bland apology. The chef had gone silent. But the dining room was half empty that Friday night. Yelp reviews exploded with one-star ratings from customers saying they could no longer support a business that excluded based on appearance. A viral TikTok showed a woman standing outside the restaurant holding a sign, "Dress code, tabi excuse code." The city's dining elite, once untouchable, had been humbled, and they knew exactly who had done it. But Marcus didn't want a spotlight. He declined interviews, refused to sell merch, turned down 2 major documentary requests. Instead, he visited small restaurants, places with cracked floors and handwritten menus, places that reminded him of his mother's diner. He talked to the cooks, asked what they needed, and when they spoke, he listened like their words were worth millions, because to him they were. By the end of the month, Marcus Rowe had pulled his investments from 5 luxury restaurants, redirected nearly $30 million into minority-owned ventures, and launched a national campaign called Check the Name. The message: don't just judge by what you see. Check the name. Check the story. Check your assumptions. Because next time, the man you dismiss might not just own the building, he might own everything around it too. 6 months later, the skyline hadn't changed. The building still gleamed with the same modernist glass exterior, and the gold-lettered sign reading Le Rive still hung above the polished entryway. But everything inside, that was different now. Gone was the velvet rope at the door. Gone was the hostess stand that had once turned him away without even looking, and gone were the faces who had laughed or stayed silent when it mattered most. In their place stood something new, more humble, more open, more human. Marcus paused outside the entrance, hands in the pockets of his coat. He wasn't here to gloat. He didn't do that. He was here because he had unfinished business. Not with the people, most of them were gone, but with the idea that had nearly taken root here, that status defines respect, that wealth decides worth. He walked inside. A young man greeted him at the door, not a hostess, not a bouncer. Just a staff member in a crisp shirt and an easy smile. "Welcome to Larive, sir. May I ask your name?" Marcus smiled faintly. It wasn't recognition in the man's eyes, just kindness. A good start, no reservation. Marcus said, "I'm just here to speak to the manager. My name's Marcus Rowe." The young man blinked. Then he straightened up slightly. "One moment, sir, I'll get her right away." Marcus took a seat on the soft leather bench by the window. A couple nearby nodded to him with polite curiosity. A few of the staff whispered, "Not in fear, just in surprise." The kind of surprise you get when the founder of the Standard walks through your door and he's smiling. The new general manager appeared moments later. Her name was Camila Rojas, a woman Marcus had personally recommended after her work leading culture reform at a hotel in Seattle. She walked straight up to him, offered her hand, and said, "Welcome back. We've been expecting you." This time, the seat he was led to wasn't tucked in a corner or out of the way. It was center stage, right by the open kitchen, where guests could see every movement, every plate, every person. The message was clear. Nothing to hide, and everyone belongs. Camilla sat down across from him briefly. "I want you to know, she said we didn't just repaint the walls or change uniforms. We changed the contracts, the hiring practices, the training, the incentive structures, everything." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "What's the new metric?" Camilla smiled. "We track guest dignity now." He nodded, slowly, impressed. "And the chef. She's from a refugee-owned bistro in Oakland, didn't go to culinary school, but she built a menu that tells her family's story, and people taste that." The old board resisted until they saw the wait list. Marcus chuckled. "Good," he said. "Let's eat." That night he stayed for nearly 2 hours. He talked to the servers, the cooks, the new sommelier who'd come up through community college, not legacy wine houses. He asked questions, shared stories, listened. And when he left, he didn't do it through the back or the private parking bay. He walked out the front door just like anyone else. Only this time, the street outside wasn't empty. Across the street stood a crowd, not a protest, not press, just people. Young black chefs, immigrant bakers, Latino bartenders, Asian American front-of-house managers, LGBTQ+ servers, people who had followed his story, who had felt it deep in their bones, who knew that what he had done wasn't about ego, it was about example. They didn't cheer when he came out. They stood, silent, respectful, eyes filled with something more powerful than applause. Recognition. One of them, a girl no older than 22, stepped forward and asked Mr. Rowe, "Why come back?" He looked at her for a moment, thoughtful. Then he said, "Because fixing what's broken matters more than walking away." He didn't stay long after that. Didn't take selfies, didn't give a speech. He just walked down the block toward his car, head, high pace, steady. And as he disappeared into the glow of the city, one truth remained. He hadn't just changed a restaurant, he had changed an industry. And the next time someone like him walks into a place like Larive, they won't get turned away. They'll get a seat at the center table, where they always belonged. Have you ever been judged before anyone even knew your name? This story isn't just about being denied a table, it's about how people are treated when they don't look the part. Marcus didn't lash out. He stood tall, spoke the truth, and changed the system. Not just for himself, but for everyone who's ever felt they didn't belong. If you've ever faced something similar, share your story in the comments. And if you believe everyone deserves to be treated with respect, no matter how they look. Type respect first below. Like, subscribe, and share this story if you believe change starts with how we treat each other, especially when no one's paying attention.